Let's see. I think everybody who's here tonight has been here before, huh? Yeah. Did you find it?
Yeah, that's going to start there with the death messengers.
Oh, okay. I was going to just read this little bit.
The Dharmakaya.
The Dharmakaya stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
We're on page 82. The Dharmakaya of thine own mind thou shalt see, and seeing that thou shalt have seen the all, the vision infinite, the round of death and birth, and the state of freedom. Milrepa. Book 1, the Chikhai Bardo and the Chönyid Bardo. Herein lieth the setting face to the reality in the intermediate state, the great deliverance by hearing while on the after-death plane from the profound doctrine of the emancipating of the consciousness by meditation upon the peaceful and wrathful deities. Death's messengers. All they who thoughtless are, nor heed what time death's messengers appear, must long the pangs of suffering feel, in some base body habitating. But all those good and holy men, what time they see death's messengers, behave not thoughtless, but give heed to what the noble doctrine says, and in attachment frighted see of birth and death the fertile source, and from attachment free themselves, thus birth and death extinguishing. Secure and happy ones are they, released from all this fleeting show. Exempted from all sin and fear, all misery have they overcome. The obeisances. To the divine body of truth. The incomprehensible, boundless light. To the divine body of perfect endowment. Who are the lotus and the peaceful and the wrathful deities? And there's a footnote. These deities are in ourselves. They are not something apart from us. We are one with all that is, in every state of sentient existence, from the lowest worlds of suffering to the highest states of bliss and perfect enlightenment. In this esoteric sense, the lotus order of deities represent the deified principles of the vocal functions in ourselves. The peaceful represent the deified principles of the heart or functions of feeling. The wrathful represent in the same way the functions of our mentality, such as thinking or reasoning and imagination or memory, centered in the brain. To the lotus-born incarnation, Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava, the lotus-born, referring to birth under pure or holy conditions, commonly called by the Tibetans Guru, or the precious Guru, or simply Guru, is regarded by his followers as an incarnation of the essence of the Buddha, Shakya Muni, in its tantric or deeply esoteric aspect. Who is the protector of all sentient beings? To the Gurus, the three bodies, obeisance. The introduction. This great doctrine of liberation by hearing, which conferreth spiritual freedom on devotees of ordinary wit, while in the intermediate state, hath three divisions: the preliminaries, the subject matter, and the conclusion. At first, the preliminaries, the guide series. The guide series refers to various treatises offering practical guidance to devotees on the Bodhi path, through the human world and thence through Bardo. the after-death state, and onward to rebirth or else to nirvana. For emancipating beings should be mastered by practice. The transference of the consciousness principle. And there's another footnote. The text contains merely the Tibetan word HPHO, pronounced pho, meaning transference of the sum total or aggregate of karmic propensities, composing or bound up with personality and consciousness. The use of the term soul being objectionable, since Buddhism as a whole denies the existence of a permanent, unchanging, personal consciousness entity, such as the Semitic faiths and animistic creeds in general understand thereby. The translator has avoided using it. But wherever any similar or equivalent term occurs herein, it should be taken to imply something akin to consciousness principle, or compound of consciousness, as implied by the Tibetan pho, or else as synonymous with the term life flux, as used chiefly by Southern Buddhists. By the guide, the highest intellects ought most certainly to be liberated. But should they not be liberated, then while in the intermediate state of the moments of death, they should practice the transference, which giveth automatic liberation by one's merely remembering it. Devotees of ordinary wit ought most certainly to be freed thereby. But should they not be freed, then while in the intermediate state, during the experiencing of reality, they should persevere in the listening to this great doctrine of liberation by hearing. Accordingly, the devotee should at first examine the symptoms of death as they generally appear in his dying body, following self-liberation by observing the characteristics of the symptoms of death. There's a footnote. A Tibetan work of the Bardo cycle, commonly used by lamas as supplementary to the Bardo Thodal. It treats of the symptoms of death in particular, scientifically and in very great detail. The late Lama Dalasamduk had planned its translation into English. Then, when all the symptoms of death are complete, he should apply the transference, which conferreth liberation by merely remembering the process. Here's another one, footnote. Liberation in this context does not necessarily imply, especially in the case of the average devotee, the liberation of nirvana, but chiefly a liberation of the life flux from the dying body in such manner as will afford the greatest possible after-death consciousness and consequent happy rebirth. Yet for the very exceptional and very highly efficient yogi or saint, the same esoteric process of transference can be, according to the Lama Gurus, so employed as to prevent any break in the flow of the stream of consciousness from the moment of a conscious death to the moment of a conscious rebirth. Judging from a translation made by the late Samdup of an old Tibetan manuscript containing practical directions for performing the transference, which the editor possesses, the process is essentially yogic, and should be employed only by a person trained in mental concentration or one-pointedness of mind, to such a high degree of proficiency as to have gained control over all the mental and bodily functions. Merely remembering the process at the all-important moment of death, as the text implies, is for a yogi equivalent to performing the transference itself. For once the yogi's training mind is directed to the process instantaneously, or as the text explains, automatically, the desired result is achieved. The reading of this Thodal. If the transference hath been effectually employed, there is no need to read this Thodal. But if the transference hath not been effectually employed, then this Thodal is to be read correctly and distinctly near the dead body. If there be no corpse, then the bed or the seat to which the deceased had been accustomed should be occupied by the reader, who ought to expound the power of the truth. Then, summoning the spirit of the deceased, imagine it to be present there listening, and read. A footnote. The lama or reader, stationed in the house of the deceased as directed, whether the corpse be there or not, is to summon the departed one in the name of truth, saying, "As the Trinity is true, and as the truth proclaimed by the Trinity is true, By the power of that truth I summon thee. Although no corpse be at hand, as there would not be when a person had met a violent or accidental death entailing loss or destruction of the human plain body, or when, to accord with astrological calculations, the body had been removed or disposed of immediately after death, a not uncommon event in Tibet. The spirit of the deceased in the invisible Bardo plain body must nevertheless be present at the reading in order to be given the necessary guidance through the other world, as the Egyptian Book of the Dead also directs. During this time, no relative or fond mate should be allowed to weep or to wail, as such is not good for the deceased. So restrain them. And there's a footnote. This prohibition is found in Brahmanism too. If the body be present just when the expiration hath ceased, either a lama who hath been as a guru to the deceased, or a brother in the faith whom the deceased trusted, or a friend for whom the deceased had great affection, putting the lips close to the ear of the body without actually touching it, should read this great thodal. There's a footnote. According to Tibetan and Lamaic belief, the body of a dying person should not be touched, that the normal departure of the consciousness principle, which should take place through the Brahmanic aperture on the crown of the head, be not interfered with. Otherwise, the departure may be brought about through some other bodily aperture and lead to birth in one of the non-human states. For example, it is held that if the departure is through the aperture of the ear, the deceased will be obliged, ere he can return to human birth, to be born in the world of the fairy-like celestial musicians, wherein sound, as in song and music, is the prevailing quality of existence. The practical application of this thodal by the officiant. Now for the explaining of the thodal itself. If thou canst gather together a grand offering, offer it in worship of the Trinity. If such cannot be done, then arrange whatever can be gathered together as objects on which thou canst concentrate thy thoughts and mentally create an illimitable an offering as possible, and worship. Then the path of good wishes, invoking the aid of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, should be recited 7 times or thrice. After that, the path of good wishes giving protection from fear in the Bardo, and the path of good wishes for safe delivery from the dangerous pitfalls of the Bardo, together with the root words of the Bardo, are to be read distinctly and with proper intonation. And there's a footnote. The 2 following passages, the first from the Book of the Craft of Dying, and the second from the Craft to Know Well to Die. Last of all, it is to be known that the prayers that follow may be conveniently said upon a sick man that laboureth to the end. And if it is a religious person, then when the convent, they say, is gathered together with smiting of the table, as the matter is, then shall be said first the litany, with the psalms and orisons that he used therewith. Afterward, if he live yet, let some man that is about him say the orisons that follow hereafter, as the time and opportunity will suffer. And they may be often rehearsed again to excite the devotion of the sick man, if he have reason and understanding with him. And if the sick man or woman may, nor cannot, say the orisons and prayers before said, some of the assistants ought to say them before him with a loud voice, in changing the words thereas they ought to be changed. Then this great thodal is to be read either 7 times or thrice, according to the occasion. And this is another quote from the Craft to Know Well to Die. After all these things, he, the person dying, ought to say 3 times, if he may, these words that follow. First cometh the setting face to face to the symptoms of death as they occur during the moments of death. Second, the application of the great vivid reminder, the setting face to reality while in the intermediate state. And third, the methods of closing the doors of the womb while in the intermediate state when seeking rebirth. Part 1. The Bardo of the Moments of Death. Instruction on the symptoms of death, or the first stage of the Chikhai Bardo, the primary clear light seen at the moment of death. The first, the setting face to face with the clear light during the intermediate state of the moments of death is. Here, some there may be who have listened much to religious instructions, yet not recognized, and some who, though recognizing, are nevertheless weak in familiarity. But all classes of individuals who have received the practical teachings called guides, will, if this be applied to them, be set face to face with the fundamental clear light, and without any intermediate state they will obtain the unborn Dharmakaya by the great perpendicular path. And there's a text, footnote. The great straight upward path. One of the doctrines peculiar to Northern Buddhism is that spiritual emancipation, even Buddhahood, may be won instantaneously without entering upon the Bardo plane and without further suffering on the age-long pathway of normal evolution which traverses the various worlds of samsaric existence. The doctrine underlies the whole of the Bardo Thodol. Faith is the first step on the secret pathway. Then comes illumination, and with it certainty, and when the goal is won, emancipation. But here again, success implies very unusual proficiency in yoga, as well as much accumulated merit or good karma on the part of the devotee. If the disciple can be made to see and to grasp the truth as soon as the Guru reveals it, that is to say, if he has the power to die consciously, and at the supreme moment of quitting the body can recognize the clear light, which will dawn upon him then, and become one with it, all samsaric bonds of illusion are broken asunder immediately. The dreamer is awakened into reality simultaneously with the mighty achievement of recognition. The manner of application is: it is best if the Guru from whom the deceased received guiding instructions can be had, but if the Guru cannot be obtained, then a brother of the faith, or if the latter is also unobtainable, then a learned man of the same faith, or should all these be unattainable, then a person who can read correctly and distinctly ought to read this many times over. Thereby the deceased will be put in mind of what he had previously heard of the setting face to face, and will at once come to recognize that fundamental light and undoubtedly obtain liberation. As regards the time for the application of these instructions, when the expiration hath ceased, the vital force will have sunk into the nerve center of wisdom. And there's a footnote. Here, as elsewhere in our text, nerve center refers to a psychic nerve center. The psychic nerve center of wisdom is located in the heart. And the knower, and there's another one, mind, knower, the mind in its knowing or cognizing functions, will be experiencing the clear light of the natural condition, another footnote, devoid of formative activity, i.e. the mind in its natural or primal state. The mind in its unnatural state, that is to say, when incarnate in a human body, is, because of the driving force of the five senses, continuously in thought formation activity. Its natural or discarnate state is a state of quiescence, comparable to its condition in the highest of dhyana or deep meditation, when still united to a human body. The conscious recognition of the clear light induces an ecstatic state of consciousness, such as saints and mystics of the West have called illumination. Then the vital force, or psychic force, or vital air, being thrown backwards and flying downwards through the right and left nerves. There's a footnote, but it's just kind of just reiterating that, of the intermediate state momentarily dawns. The above directions should be applied before the vital force hath rushed into the left nerve, after first having traversed the navel nerve center. The time ordinarily necessary for this motion of the vital force is as long as the inspiration is still present, or about the time required for eating a meal. And there's a footnote. When this text first took form, the reckoning of time was apparently yet primitive, mechanical timekeeping appliances being unknown. A similar condition still prevails in many parts of Tibet, where the period of a mealtime is frequently mentioned in old religious books, a period of from 20 minutes to half an hour in duration. Then the manner of the application of the instructions is, when the breathing is about to cease, it is best if the transference hath been applied efficiently. If the application hath been inefficient, then address the deceased thus: O nobly born so and so by name, the time hath now come for thee to seek the path in reality. Thy breathing is about to cease. Thy Guru hath set thee face to face before with the clear light, and now thou art about to experience it in its reality, in the Bardo state, wherein all things are like the void and cloudless sky, and the naked, spotless intellect is like unto a transparent vacuum without circumference or center. At this moment know thou thyself, and abide in that state. I too at this time am setting thee face to face. Having read this, repeat it many times in the ear of the person dying, even before the expiration hath ceased, so as to impress it on the mind of the dying one. If the expiration is about to cease, turn the dying one over on the right side, which posture is called the lying posture of a lion. The throbbing of the arteries on the right and left side of the throat is to be pressed. If the person dying be disposed to sleep, or if the sleeping state advances, that should be arrested and the arteries pressed gently but firmly. And there's a footnote. The dying person should die fully awake and keenly conscious of the process of death, hence the pressing of the arteries. Thereby the vital force will not be able to return from the median nerve. There's another footnote. The median or trijunction. The Sanskrit English dictionary gives Dut. Is that an S at the end? I can't tell what that is. Dutzer, I don't know. As the only similar word defined as shaking or moving, which if applied to our text may refer to the vibratory motion of the psychic force traversing the median nerve as its channel, and will be sure to pass out through the Brahmanic aperture. Oh. And there's a footnote. If non-distracted and alertly conscious, at this psychological moment the dying person will realize, through the power conferred by the reading of the thodal, the importance of holding the vital force in the median nerve till it passes out thence through the aperture of Brahma. Now the real setting face to face is to be applied. At this moment, the first glimpsing of the Bardo of the clear light of reality, which is the infallible mind of the Dharmakaya, is experienced by all sentient beings. The interval between the cessation of the expiration and the cessation of the inspiration is the time during which the vital force remaineth in the median nerve. Footnote. After the expiration has ceased, the vital force is thought to remain in the median nerve so long as the heart continues to throb. The common people call this the state wherein the consciousness principle hath fainted away. It dependeth upon the constitution, good or bad. The duration of this state is uncertain. It dependeth upon the constitution, good or bad, and the state of the nerves and vital force. In those who have had even a little practical experience of the firm, tranquil state of dhyana, and in those who have sound nerves, this state continueth for a long time. A footnote. Sometimes it may continue for 7 days, but usually only for 4 or 5 days. The consciousness principle, however, save in certain conditions of trance, such as a yogi, for example, can induce, is not necessarily resident in the body all the while. Normally it quits the body at the moment called death, holding a subtle magnetic-like relationship with the body until the state referred to in the text comes to an end. Only for adepts in yoga would the departure of the consciousness principle be accomplished without break in the continuity of the stream of consciousness, that is to say, without the swoon state referred to. The death process is the reverse of the birth process, birth being the incarnating, death the discarnating of the consciousness principle. But in both alike, there is a passing from one state of consciousness into another. And just as a babe must wake up in this world and learn by experience the nature of this world, so likewise a person at death must wake up in the Bardo world and become familiar with its own peculiar conditions. The Bardo body, formed by matter in an invisible or ethereal-like state, is an exact duplicate of the human body, from which it is separated in the process of death. Retained in the Bardo body are the consciousness principle and the psychic nerve system, the counterpart for the psychic or Bardo body of the physical nerve system of the human body. In the setting face-to-face, the repetition of the above address to the deceased is to be persisted in until a yellowish liquid beginneth to appear from the various apertures of the bodily organs of the deceased. In those who have led an evil life, and in those of unsound nerves, the above state endureth only so long as would take to snap a finger. Again, in some, it endureth as long as the time taken for the eating of a meal. In various tantras it is said that this state of swoon endureth for about 3.5 days. Most other religious treatises say for 4 days, and that this setting face-to-face with the clear light ought to be persevered in during the whole time. The manner of applying these directions is, if when dying one be capable of diagnosing the symptoms of death, use of the knowledge should have been made ere this. And there's a footnote. The full meaning implied is that not only should the person about to die diagnose the symptoms of death as they come, one by one, but that he should also, if able, recognize the clear light without being set face-to-face with it by the second person. If the dying person be unable to do so, then either the guru or a brother in the faith with whom the one dying was very intimate should be kept at hand, who will vividly impress upon the one dying the symptoms of death as they appear in due order, repeatedly saying at first thus. Another footnote. The following instructions from Ars Moriendi, 15th century. When any of likelihood shall die, or is likely to die, then it is most necessary to have a special person, the which will heartily help and pray for him, and therewith counsel the sick for the weal or health of the soul. Now the symptoms of earth sinking into water are come. And there's a footnote. The 3 chief symptoms of death, which the text merely suggests by naming the first of them, is being taken for granted that the reader officiating will know the others and name them as they occur, with their symbolical counterpart, are as follows. 1. A bodily sensation of pressure, earth sinking into water. 2. A bodily sensation of clammy coldness, as though the body were immersed in water, which gradually merges into that of feverish heat, water sinking into fire. 3. A feeling as though the body were being blown to atoms, fire sinking into air. Each symptom is accompanied by visible external changes in the body, such as loss of control over facial muscles, loss of hearing, loss of sight, the breath coming in gasps just before the loss of consciousness, whereby lamas trained in the science of death detect one by one the interdependent psychic phenomena culminating in the release of the Bardo body from its human plane envelope. The translator held that the science of death, as expounded in this treatise, has been arrived at through the actual experiencing of death on the part of learned lamas, who, when dying, have explained to their pupils the very process of death itself in analytical and elaborate detail. When all the symptoms of death are about to be completed, then enjoin upon the one dying this resolution, speaking in a low tone of voice in the ear. O nobly born, or if it be a priest, O venerable sir, let not thy mind be distracted. If it is a brother in the faith, or some other person, then call him by name, and say thus, O nobly born, that which is called death, being come to thee now, resolve thus. O this now is the hour of death. By taking advantage of this death, I will so act for the good of all sentient beings, peopling the illimitable expanse of the heavens, as to obtain the perfect Buddhahood by resolving on love and compassion towards them, and by directing my entire effort to the soul perfection. Shaping the thoughts thus, especially at this time when the Dharmakaya of clear light in the state after death can be realized for the benefit of all sentient beings, know that thou art in that state, and resolve that thou wilt obtain the best boon of the state of the great symbol in which thou art, as follows. And there was a footnote. In this state, realization of the ultimate truth is possible, providing sufficient advance on the path has been made by the deceased before death. Otherwise he cannot benefit now, and must wander on into lower and lower conditions of the Bardo, as determined by karma, until rebirth. Even if I cannot realize it, yet will I know this Bardo, and, mastering the great body of union in Bardo, will appear in whatever shape, will benefit all beings whomsoever. And another footnote. The Tibetan of the text is here unusually concise. Literally rendered, it is, will appear in whatever will subdue for beneficial ends whomsoever. To subdue in this sense any sentient being of the human world, a form which will appeal religiously to that being, is assumed. Thus, to appeal to a Shivaite devotee, the form of Shiva is assumed. To a Buddhist, the form of the Buddha, Shakyamuni. To a Christian, the form of Jesus. To a Muslim, the form of the Prophet, and so on for other religious devotees, and for all manners and conditions of mankind, a form appropriate to the occasion, for example, for subduing children, parents, and vice versa, for shishyas, gurus, and vice versa, for common people, kings or rulers, and for kings, ministers of state. I will serve all sentient beings, infinite in number, as are the limits of the sky. Keeping thyself unseparated from this resolution, thou shouldst try to remember whatever devotional practices thou wert accustomed to perform during thy lifetime. There's a footnote from the book of the Craft of Dying. Also, if he that shall die have long time and space to bethink himself, and be not taken with hasty death, then may be read afore him, of them that be about him, devout histories and devout prayers, in the which he most delighted in when he was in heal or health. In saying this, the reader shall put his lips close to the ear, and shall repeat it distinctly, clearly, impressing it upon the dying person so as to prevent his mind from wandering even for a moment. After the expiration hath completely ceased, press the nerve of sleep firmly, and a lama or a person higher or more learned than thyself impress in these words thus: Reverend Sir, now that thou art experiencing the fundamental clear light, try to abide in that state which now thou art experiencing. And also in the case of any other person, the reader shall set him face to face thus: O nobly born so-and-so, listen. Now thou art experiencing the radiance of the clear light of pure reality. Recognize it. O nobly born, thy present intellect, or their cognizing faculty was a footnote, in real nature void, not formed into anything as regards characteristics or color, naturally void, is the very reality, the all good. There's a footnote. The first state of Buddhahood. Our block print text in error here gives for the all good, which means all good mother. According to the great perfectionist school, the father is that which appears or phenomena. The mother is that which is conscious of the phenomena. Again, bliss is the father, and the voidness, perceiving it, the mother. The radiance is the father, and the voidness, perceiving it, the mother. And as in our text here, the intellect is the father, the voidness, the mother. The repetition of void is to emphasize the importance of knowing the intellect to be in reality void, or of the nature of voidness, i.e. of the unborn, uncreated, unshaped, primordial. Thine own intellect, which is now voidness, yet not to be regarded as of the voidness of nothingness, but as being the intellect itself, unobstructed, shining, thrilling, and blissful, is the very consciousness. There's another footnote. Consciousness as distinct from the knowing faculty by which it cognizes or knows itself to be. Ordinarily, Rigpa and Sheshrig are synonymous, but in an abstruse philosophical treatise, as here, Rigpa refers to the consciousness in its purest and most spiritual, supramundane aspect, and Sheshrig to the consciousness in that grosser aspect, not purely spiritual, whereby cognizance of phenomena is present. In this part of the Bardo Thodol, the psychological analysis of consciousness or mind is particularly abstruse. Wherever the text contains the word Rigpa, we have rendered it as consciousness, and the word Sheshrig as intellect, or else, to suit the context, Rigpa as consciousness, and Sheshrig as consciousness of phenomena, which is intellect. The all-good Buddha. And there's another footnote. In this state, the experiencer and the thing experienced are inseparably one and the same, as, for example, the yellowness of gold cannot be separated from gold, nor saltness from salt. For the normal human intellect, this transcendental state is beyond comprehension. Thine own consciousness, not formed into anything, in reality void, and the intellect shining and blissful. These two are inseparable. The union of them is the Dharmakaya state of perfect enlightenment. And there's another footnote. From the union of the two states of mind or consciousness implied by the two terms, Rigpa and Sheshrig, and symbolized by the all-good father and the all-good mother, is born the state of the Dharmakaya, the state of perfect enlightenment, Buddhahood. The Dharmakaya, body of truth, symbolizes the purest and the highest state of being, a state of supramundane consciousness, devoid of all mental limitations or obscurations, which arise from the contact of the primordial consciousness with matter. Thine own consciousness, shining, void, and inseparable from the great body of radiance, hath no birth, no death, and is the immutable light, Buddha Amitabha. As the Buddha Samantabhadra state is the state of the all-good, so the Buddha Amitabha state is the state of boundless light. And as the text applies, both are, in the last analysis, the same state, merely regarded from two viewpoints. In the first, it emphasized the mind of the all-good. In the second, the enlightening Bodhi power, symbolized as Buddha Amitabha, the personification of the wisdom faculty, source of life and light. Knowing this is sufficient, recognizing the voidness of thine own intellect to be Buddhahood, and looking upon it as being thine own consciousness, is to keep thyself in the state of the divine mind. And there's another one. Thoughts or mind, and being in the honorific form, divine mind, of the Buddha. And there's another one. Realization of the non-sansara, which is the voidness, the unbecome, the unborn, the unmade, the unformed, implies Buddhahood, perfect enlightenment, the state of the divine mind of the Buddha. Compare the following passage from the Diamond Sutra with its Chinese commentary. Every form or quality of phenomena is transient and elusive. When the mind realizes that the phenomena of life are not real phenomena, the Lord Buddha may then be clearly perceived. Chinese annotation: the spiritual Buddha must be realized within the mind, otherwise there can be no true perception of the Lord Buddha. Repeat this distinctly and clearly 3 or even 7 times. that will recall to the mind of the dying one the former than when living, setting face to face by the Guru. Secondly, it will cause the naked consciousness to be recognized as the clear light. And thirdly, recognizing one's own self, thus one becometh permanently united with the Dharmakaya, and liberation will be certain. And there's a footnote. If, when dying, one be familiar with this state in virtue of previous spiritual or yogic training in the human world, and have power to win Buddhahood at this all-determining moment, the wheel of rebirth is stopped and liberation instantaneously achieved. But such spiritual efficiency is so very rare that the normal mental condition of the dying person is unequal to the supreme... this is blocked. What does it say? What is that next?
Feet.
Okay, it's out of my... Okay, this to the supreme feat of holding on to the state in which the clear light shines. And there... follows a progressive descent into lower and lower states of the Bardo existence, and then rebirth. The simile of a needle balanced and set rolling on a thread is used by the lamas to elucidate this condition. So long as the needle retains its balance, it remains on the thread. Eventually, however, the law of gravitation affects it and it falls. In the realm of the clear light, similarly, the mentality of a person dying momentarily enjoys a condition of balance or perfect equilibrium and of oneness. Owing to unfamiliarity with such a state, which is an ecstatic state of non-ego, of subliminal consciousness, the consciousness principle of the average human being lacks the power to function in it. Karmic propensities becloud the consciousness principle with thoughts of personality, of individualized being, of dualism, and losing equilibrium. The consciousness principle falls away from the clear light. It is ideation of ego, of self, which prevents the realization of nirvana, which is the blowing out of the flame of selfish longing. And so the wheel of life continues to turn. Maybe we should stop there.
Yeah.
Lenny and the Troll and Pilar.